How will the staggering amount of media attention, especially television, affect the summit and our perceptions of it? With us this evening is Joshua Meyrowitz, a UNH professor who has some very definite ideas about television and summitry. Professor, welcome, and let me say first of all that you've written a book entitled, I believe, No Sense of Place, which deals with the influence of television on world events. And in particular, your idea of the summit is that it will somehow trivialize the event. How is that?
Well, I think that television doesn't deal very well with complex ideas, and that ideas and ideologies tend to exist in language and words. Television tends to deal with images. Television tends to reduce ideologies to flesh and bones, and so we tend to respond to it in an emotional way, and logic and history and truth tend to get left out of the television picture.
So in other words, we are beginning to see the human faces behind the Russians' party line that we've heard of all these years.
Well, I think we're seeing in the trivializing and in the distorting of it, we're also seeing that aspect of it, the humanizing of it, that we're now coming to respond to them as people rather than as enemies.
Is that good or bad?
I think it's a little bit of both, in that television, in reducing the issue of our human survival, the survival of our species, to who has the better smile or the more fashionably dressed wife, that can be dangerous.
So it can be manipulated for propaganda purposes.
Yes, that we're not really talking about the truth of what's being said or done, and we're not talking about the complexity of working toward peace. Instead, we're talking about style.
So Gorbachev could be a sheep in wolf's clothing. Nice smile, but still a very hard man behind that.
Yes, and also he could be a front man for an ideology or bureaucracy that's very different from the way he behaves. And the same could be said of our president.
Now, you're also saying that beyond the public perception, what it's actually doing is forcing President Reagan to make certain manipulations. How does that work?
Well, what's happened is that diplomacy, which used to take place through private diplomatic channels, is now fought out in the arena of public opinion, or at least in part. And as a result of that, people in heads of state are finding that they have to adapt somewhat to what the public perceptions are.
In other words, if Gorbachev comes off as a nice guy to the American public, what does that force Reagan to do?
Well, I think it doesn't enable him, for example, to simply brand the Soviet Union as an evil empire. It doesn't allow him, as previous administrations could, to make us think of communists as having horns and being inhuman. It forces him to interact with them in some productive way.
Even if this is just a front, the smile is just a front, it still forces the president to become perhaps softer in his position?
Yes, because in international politics, as in national politics, image has a certain kind of reality, and we seem to attend to it and to respond to it.
Now, despite whether it's sincere or not, the smile on Gorbachev's part or the smile on President Reagan's face, despite the sincerity, despite how much of it may be staged and play acting, the fact that we're seeing people right in our living rooms so intensely and so thoroughly, that's the first time, I think, for the summit on this kind of blanket coverage, because we're seeing human faces more and more, despite whether it's sincere or not, is that good or bad for the future of world negotiations and world peace?
I think we've mentioned some of the things that are bad about it, but I think there is one ray of hope, and that is that television, by showing us the human side of people, tends to make us think that peace is possible. And I think it's more difficult now to rally support to blow up Gorbachev and his wife, for example, than it would be to blow up an evil empire. And in general, I think that it's harder to shoot once you've seen the whites of their eyes.
So in a very positive way, then, it's forcing people to deal with each other, or at least recognize the humanness behind the party lines at both sides.
Yes, behind all the differences, I think we're seeing something in common, that we are, after all, human beings and the same.
Professor, thank you very much for being with us this evening on a very fascinating topic.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.